Hello, and welcome to the Geopolitics Explained podcast. In today's episode, we're going to discuss a topic that I have quite a deep interest in, and that is game theory. Game theory is the mathematical modelling of strategic interactions. In game theory, any person or actor that is involved is referred to as a player, and these players pursue actions that are called strategies. These strategies then result in payoffs, which are the reward or loss associated with every player for their chosen strategy. I often describe geopolitics as a complex web of strings. It's when we explore game theory that this analogy becomes clear. One key example in recent memory was when Donald Trump enacted his Liberation Day tariffs. This was one player choosing his strategy, but as a result, all other players in the world then had to choose their own strategy in response. This resulted in some seeking trade deals, others proposed investment in the United States, while some chose to stand their ground. Despite the strategy that these nations chose, what matters is that one player making a move can cause many others to respond. Trump's payoff in this scenario was the collective response of all other nations around the world. When it comes to game theory, one huge change since the beginning of Trump's second term has been the payoff structure for these geopolitical interactions between nations. On occasion, positive sum interactions can occur. This is when the total payoff for an interaction between players is positive. This means that all players can gain from the interaction, and these are often referred to as win-win relationships. However, recently, Trump seems to be in pursuit of zero-sum games. In these games, the total payoff for all players is zero. As a result, if we model a two-player geopolitical interaction, the positive payoff that is received by one player is equal to the negative payoff that is received by the other. This, of course, grows more complicated when multiple players exist, as we can model our geopolitical world by. But zero-sum games do provide a framework through which we can analyse Trump's recent moves. And so, in today's episode, we're going to explore why Trump is playing these zero-sum games. To start, I'm going to introduce realism into the episode. The prominence of realism in our geopolitical world fluctuates over time, depending on global power structures, the goals of geopolitical superpowers, and global instability. Realism in geopolitics is a dominant theory that views states as self-interested actors that operate in a chaotic global system. The main characteristics of realism are national interest, power, and survival over ideals and morality. In the aftermath of the Cold War, the United States was seen as a unipolar power. As a result, realism was less prevalent because there were less threats to the United States and nobody could challenge the United States as the ruling geopolitical power of the world. However, in our world today, that is changing. The United States remains the ruling geopolitical superpower, but it is seeing China as a rising threat. This could lead to the potential for a geopolitical tussle between the United States and China. When it comes to analysing the power of these geopolitical superpowers, there are many indicators that we can use. It's notable that the United States is facing a decline in many of these indicators, such as its heightened debt burden, internal disorder, and education. So, in these situations throughout history, when a ruling geopolitical power is challenged by a rising geopolitical power, the ruling power has a choice. Do they accept their decline, or do they fight to attempt to address and reverse this decline? In answering this question, The United States is incentivized to defend its position in the geopolitical world order, regardless of who is caught in the secondary and tertiary order effects of these moves. As a result, this is a world where geopolitical power is being leveraged. This has seen the United States pursue the Monroe Doctrine, as we've been discussing in recent episodes. The aim is to secure the Western Hemisphere and remove influence of foreign powers from North and South America. From this point, the United States hopes that it will build a strong base from which it can attempt to take on China in the Indo-Pacific. But if we flash back to the discussion on game theory earlier, this world is looking more zero-sum by the day. Because the United States possesses power and leverage, Donald Trump wants the United States to be the positive payoff aspect of a zero-sum interaction. This means that any other nation that is hurt will be the negative payoff aspect of a zero-sum interaction. So this is where Trump and his zero-sum pursuits arise from. The main focus is China, but other nations could get hurt. When it comes to Trump himself, he has always seen the world as a business, and his transactional diplomacy has been clear to see throughout both of his presidential terms. In his second term, his pursuit of minerals deals in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Ukraine are prime examples of this. Ultimately, these deals are Trump pursuing positive gains for the United States by diversifying away from Chinese critical mineral control. These deals are not occurring because Trump is interested in peace. It is self-interested and is based on survival. These moves do indicate that realism is currently becoming more prominent in international relations and geopolitics. To address these areas of decline or relative weakness in comparison to China, Trump has to leverage the areas of strength that the United States does possess. One strength is its economic strength relative to other nations. This has been seen in reality with Trump's tariff pursuit. Trump has received favourable deals, either through pushing elevated tariffs on other nations, or by nations making investment or trade deals with the United States to avoid these elevated tariffs. Often in these deals, the United States is exerting pressure and not giving anything up, and is receiving concessions in return. Naturally, this makes them the positive side of a zero-sum interaction. Another strength of the United States is its military strength, and this is where Trump's current gripe with NATO originates. Nations have been protected under the security umbrella of the United States, and this has often come at the financial cost of investment. But despite the figures and the facts, what matters is that Trump sees NATO as zero-sum. Currently, the United States is on the negative side of the relationship when it comes to NATO, and the other NATO members are on the positive side because they gain security at the expense of the United States' investment in defence. Trump is attempting to flip this relationship on its head so that he is the beneficiary of the positive payoff in a zero-sum relationship with other NATO states. Because the United States holds the cards to pressure many nations of the world, I expect this coercion and pressure to continue, where other nations will get hurt, but again, the main focus remains on China. So, it's clear that we are currently existing in a zero-sum world. The next question that I want to explore is, will we reach an endpoint in these zero-sum games? Or are we set for further escalation? The worry is that zero-sum games have the potential to escalate. If we have a two-player zero-sum game, one nation receives the positive payoff and one nation receives the negative payoff. If both nations continue to pursue a strategy in the pursuit of the positive payoff, we are naturally going to escalate. This escalation risks spiraling into an environment of negative sum games. Negative sum games occur when the total payoff is negative. This creates lose-lose scenarios where every player ends up worse off than the position that they started in. Typical characteristics of negative sum games are inefficiency, destructive behaviour, and escalatory costs. Typical examples include certain types of hybrid warfare, especially trade war, as we recently saw between the United States and China last year. Ultimately, in this situation, the United States backed down, and this is indicative of the exact reason why the United States is undertaking this pursuit of zero-sum games. Financial warfare can also develop into a negative-sum game. Last week, during the Trump-Greenland tensions and the speech that Trump made at Davos, a Deutsche Bank analyst stated that Europe had the option to reduce its exposure to US assets. This would damage asset prices and lead to upward pressure in borrowing rates in the United States. Scott Bessent dismissed this idea, but in a zero-sum environment, there is only so much that a nation can take before it does lash out. Emmanuel Macron also discussed Europe's anti-coercion instrument as a potential tool that it could use against the United States. This would target US companies and the US financial system in general. In such a scenario of Europe attempting to cause financial damage to the United States would also respond with financial weaponization against Europe. This would be an environment of negative sum games until one side backs down. If no side backs down, the escalation continues. Naturally, since the overall payoff in these situations is negative, it's during these periods of negative sum games that nations stagnate or decline. The winners when we emerge from negative sum environments are those who were self-sufficient enough to access key necessities alone, or those nations that didn't enter into a negative sum environment in the first place. To highlight the potential trend of our geopolitical world into a negative sum environment, we need to look at previous geopolitical superpowers. It's this that we'll discuss in next episode. So, to finish off today's episode, it's all well in presenting such ideas, but real-world examples will help support this idea. On Friday, I'll discuss zero-sum and negative-sum geopolitical interactions, but I will frame these discussions in key pieces of geopolitical analysis and theory. We will discuss Ray Dalio's Big Cycle, Thucydides' Trap, and the Fourth Turning Framework. These pieces of work are connected to our current position in a zero-sum world and the potential for geopolitical relations to decline into negative sum. If this discussion sounds of interest to you, make sure that you keep an eye out for that episode. Again, that will be released on Friday. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on the podcast platform of your choice. It really helps out the podcast. I've been Dylan, and I'll talk to you next time.